Hi there, this is a tutorial for MIDI Goblin's Arpeggiator. Now there's a few different arpeggiators on the market, but MIDI Goblin's a little bit special because it can actually arpeggiate notes that it's received. So you can hold down a chord on your synth or MIDI controller, and MIDI Goblin will actually arpeggiate those notes. The MIDI Goblin's a lot more than just an arpeggiator though. It's a hardware patch librarian, MIDI CC LFO, 32-step sequencer, scale and chord generator, patch morpher. It does some other things as well, and I'm working on adding more features in the future. You can order a MIDI Goblin right now through BackerKit, but it'll probably take about 45 days before you get one. I just want to make sure I get all those other backer orders out before I start shipping new ones. I also have a Patreon as well. If you want to sign up for that, go for it. It just gives me a little bit of encouragement to make new features for MIDI Goblin and helps me pay off this video recording equipment. It also helps me feed my kitties. Anyways, let's begin. First, if you're using an old MIDI Goblin firmware, update to 1.05 or newer. There's been a few improvements to the Arpeggiator and Remap app, so get that new firmware. Here's how to hook things up for synthesizers with in and out connections. And here's how to hook things up if you're using a MIDI controller in a synth that only has a MIDI in connection. For MIDI controller setups, all you need to do is plug everything in and turn the Goblin's MIDI note through on. Set the arpeggiator and MIDI note through channels to your synth's receive channel, then save your settings. You're good to go. For synthesizer setups, the arpeggiator works best with the Goblin's MIDI note through turned on and your synth's local control turned off. Set the arpeggiator and MIDI note through channels to your synth's receive channel and save your settings. Now, if you're using a modern synth and need local control turned on in order to edit your parameters, leave your synth's local control on, set the arpeggiator channel, and turn off MIDI note through. The Arpeggiator app should still work pretty well, but you may momentarily hear notes as they're being added to the arpeggio with this setup. If you're using a vintage synth that doesn't have a local control option, set the ARP channel to your receive channel, and you can leave MIDI note through off as well. But your synth might not be able to process note messages for keys while they're held down. So the Arpeggiator app will only work in latched mode after you've released your keys. It's not ideal, but it's still pretty fun. For this tutorial, I'm using a modern synth with local control on and MIDI note through off because I don't mind the momentary notes and I like to fiddle with my parameters while I play arpeggios. Now that everything's set up, go to the Arpeggiator app. Turn it on by pressing yes or left or right on the status, and then just play a chord on your synth. When you release the chord, the arpeggio stops. You can change the speed of the arpeggio by twisting the encoder knob. Or if you want to use an external MIDI clock source, go back to settings and just change the clock source to MIDI by pressing left or right on the source. I'm only going to be using the Goblin for this though, so I'll just leave it at Goblin. Anyways, back to the Arpeggiator app. You can change the direction of the arpeggio by selecting direction and just pressing left or right. There's left right, right left, left right left, and random. You can also change the maximum number of notes in the arpeggio here by pressing left and right. You can arpeggiate up to 8 notes in total. Setting the maximum number of notes is where things get interesting. If you hold down a chord that has the same number of notes as the max value, then any additional notes will bypass the arpeggiator. This allows you to play leads over top of your arpeggio. The latched mode allows arpeggios to play even after you've released your hand from the keyboard. You can add notes to a latched arpeggio by pressing keys on the keyboard. And if you want to remove a note from the arpeggio, just press the same key. I'm going to turn the latch mode off for now. The Arpeggiator has a submenu as well. If you press menu while in the Arpeggiator app, it brings you to this submenu. Here you can see a few different options. You can change the velocity of the arpeggio that's being played. You can change the channel that the arpeggio is being transmitted to, although I wouldn't suggest doing this while it's playing. You can sync the arpeggio to the sequencer, and you can transpose. Transpose only works with latched arpeggio, so let's give that a shot. I'm going to turn latch mode back on and press a chord. Now I'm going to go to that sub-menu. There's some little arrows pointing left and right. If I press left, you can hear it transpose downwards. If I press right, you can hear it transpose upwards. The transpose amount indicates how many keys the arpeggio will shift. Syncing to the sequencer is another feature that's pretty fun. For this, I'm going to turn off everything, and then I'm just going to go to the sequencer app and make a quick little sequence by playing some keys on my keyboard. I'm going to turn on that sync to sequencer option, and now I'm just going to play an arpeggio by holding down a chord. This also works with latch mode on, and you can play leads over top of it if your arpeggio has the maximum number of notes in it. It's fucking crazy. I don't know who the hell's going to use this thing, but it's pretty fun. And lastly, if you want to toggle the Arpeggiator app on and off using one of the user-defined buttons, just do the following. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoy the Arpeggiator app. It was the most difficult thing for me to program by far. It was also the first app that I made for the MIDI Goblin other than patch saving. So yeah, hope you guys have fun with it. It's my favorite app. And yeah, you can finally play an arpeggio with your own keyboard.